Hey, what's up, Sparkers? Today's video is going to be on the compressor pedals. So, Positive Grid included, I think it was 5 compressor pedals. So yeah, there's the LA Comp, the Sustain Comp, the Red Comp, and the Bass Comp, and the Optical Comp. And these are basically compression. What it does is it reduces the transients in the sound, so it'll keep the loudest sounds a little bit quieter and the quietest sounds a little bit louder. So it's going to effectively squash the peaks and the valleys of the wave sign of your recording or of your signal. So effectively, the higher you set the compression settings, the more squashed the sound is, right? So the overall effect tends to feel like the sound or the signal is a bit louder, just because it tends to kind of boost the lower sounds, and it does drop the very loudest sounds a little bit. But typically the feeling of a compressor will be such that it's going to kind of feel a little bit louder. So a lot of people kind of use compressors as sort of a boost to their signal, and there are settings that you can use to achieve that. But what's actually happening is you're squashing the signal a little bit. So again, you're keeping the super loud sounds a little bit quieter and the super quiet sounds a little bit louder. So we'll start with this LA Comp, which is the first one. All of these are very famous compressor pedals. But this first one is the Teletronix LA2A compressor. This compressor was used in radio for a long time. It's one of the more widely used studio compressors. You can look that up. It's a Teletronix 2A. There's really only 2 knobs to fiddle with, and that's because you're not going to adjust the attack or the release settings, we'll get to that in another pedal here, but essentially it's going to handle that stuff on its own for you. It kind of has its own settings for that. But you do have 2 knobs here. The first is gain and the second is peak reduction. And so what the gain does is it's effectively is the overall loudness after the compression takes effect. So it's the output gain, in other words. So you can set this to a point where it doesn't change the loudness at all, and that's kind of right around here in the middle or so. It's between like 4.8 and 5.5 or so, where it doesn't really do much to the volume of the signals. So I'll kind of show you that real quick here. I'll just play a chord without it first, and then we'll play it with, and you'll hear it should be about the same volume. So you'll see there it doesn't really do much as far as the volume goes, but if you pick this up, it's going to be louder, right? So let's put it right there. So there it goes, it's a little louder, and then you can do it lower too. So that's what the gain does, essentially. It's the volume after the compression takes effect. And then the peak reduction here this is where you're actually adjusting the amount of compression. So if you leave this all the way down, it's not really doing anything. So you can kind of see that here. Then I turn it on. Not really doing anything to the loudest parts of the signal or the quietest, but if I turn this up a little bit, you'll hear it kind of start to squash the sound. So the quieter parts are louder, the louder parts are quieter, and you can hear the difference. So, and that gets a little more noticeable the more you turn this up. So we'll turn this up to about 3/4 of the way there, or 2/3. And first we'll turn it off. And then we'll turn it on. So what you're hearing there is a squash signal. We turn it all the way up and it gets even the most noticeable. So no matter how loud I play those strings now, it's going to be pretty quiet. You can hear the difference when I turn it off. I'm going to do it the same way. So that's what compressors effectively are doing. They're kind of taking the loudness of your tone or your signal rather, and bringing it down. The other option you have here on this pedal is the you can change it to a limiter, and essentially what that does is it only reduces the loud parts of the signal a little bit. It doesn't take the bottom or the quietest parts and bring them up. It only basically affects the loudest parts of the signal. So that's the LA Comp compressor. It's a little bit hard to tell to hear it unless you're really kind of playing around with it or you're very familiar with it. This particular compressor is used a lot with vocals, and people use it for bass guitars as well. So anyway, I hope this demonstration on the LA Comp pedal helps, and I'll also do the next 4 compressors as well. So this is the Boss CS3 sustain compressor pedal. It's based on that pedal rather. It's called the on here it's called the Sustain Comp, but again it's based on the Boss CS3. And there are 4 settings that you can adjust on this guy. The first here is just the level. So this is effectively the output gain on the overall pedal. So you can, if you just use this to adjust the signal, it would basically be a boost or a reduction. Right around here or so is kind of not affecting the signal one way or the other. That's kind of passing through essentially the same signal level, but putting it even at 5 is actually going to boost it slightly. And then the tone is basically a colorization of the tone, so you can kind of make it sound like it's lower frequency by dropping it down, effectively dropping the treble down quite a bit, or raising the lower frequencies. And then putting it on high basically is the opposite of that. It's increasing all the high frequencies and dropping the lows a little bit, or that's the effective result of it. And then the attack setting here, this is actually an adjustment on how quickly the actual compressor takes effect. So when it's set to minimum, it's basically not doing anything to the signal. It won't really affect the loudness or the quietness of the signal. When you put it on max, though, it's going to affect it as quickly as possible. So it'll take those transients down much more quickly within, if you have it max, it'll do it within like a 1/10 of a second or sorry, 100th of a second or so. And this is why it's an adjustable setting. When you have it at max, it does it the most quickly. When you have it at min, it doesn't do it at all. So that's basically how you adjust the compression setting itself. And then this sustain is going to sort of extend the duration of your notes if you turn it all the way up. It'll kind of cut them off pretty quickly if you turn it all the way down, kind of acting as a limiter or almost like a noise gate. So that's kind of how that pedal works. I'm just gonna switch back real quick to the default settings so you can kind of see how it sounds. I'm gonna first play a chord or 2 off, and then I'll turn it on. You'll kind of hear the difference. So this is with it turned on. So as I said earlier, it's boosting the volume a little bit by being right in the middle. I'll lower this a little bit, and you can kind of hear it drop all the way down, or boost all the way up. So that's boosting it a slight bit. The tone, you can kind of hear the difference if I lower it. And then all the way high, you can hear this too. So that's the tone adjustment. And then again, on the attack, this is effectively doing no compression at all. If I turn it all the way up, it's attacking that signal much more quickly. It's enacting the compression and taking that transients down. And then again, the sustain is going to sort of extend the duration of the notes. So you can hear this is a stret, right? Normally the notes don't hold very long on the stret. So that's how this sustain comp pedal works. So thanks. So this is the Red Comp pedal. This is based on the MXR Dynacomp. And this is another very simple compressor pedal. There's only 2 settings effectively to use. It's a little bit more of a subtle compression setting, but there's actually I almost feel like this is more of a sustain pedal. It adds a lot of sustain when you set the sensitivity appropriately. So there's two knobs. The output, which is again the loudness, overall loudness of the output of the pedal. So you turn it all the way down. Right now it's off. This is the default setting. So I'll play a couple of chords with and without it, so you can hear the difference. So this is without. Let's turn it on. So right around this zone for the output is not going to boost or reduce the output signal. It's kind of keeps it where it is. So the volume is about the same with and without. Maybe a little bit lower is about even. So anyway, but you can reduce the output quite a bit, and you can increase it quite a bit, right? So it doesn't bring it all the way down to zero, even when you've got it all the way down. But it does drop it a little bit. So that's the output, and then the sensitivity is really the compression. So if you bring this all the way down, this is sort of the most amount of compression you're going to get when the sensitivity is all the way down. You turn all the way up. It's not really doing much. In fact, this should be pretty much the same as without. So anyway, if the sensitivity, when you want it to have the most amount of compression, leave it all the way down. So if you turn this output up and the sensitivity down, this is kind of how you get sustain, by leaving that output a little bit high and the sensitivity low. So if I turn this off, that's about a normal decay for the note. If I turn this on, quite a good amount of sustain there. So that's typically what this red comp pedal is used for. And then next up we have the number 4, which is the bass comp. This is based on the ABS multi-comp pedal. And there's only a couple of settings on this guy as well. There's the compression and the gain. So we'll show you how this one works. Let's play without again and then with. So that's without. I'll turn it on. So again, this is the amount of compression. This is the amount of gain. So that's the bass comp pedal, and then finally we have the optical comp. And this is based on the BBE Opto Stomp pedal. And there's 2 settings on here, and then there's a pad. And the pad is probably the easiest to see real quick. This basically drops the total volume by 15 decibels. So that's just purely of input signal level. And then similarly, you can adjust the signal level by adding 6 decibels or removing 6 decibels. Even right down the middle is going to do really nothing to the volume. You can see that there. And then the comp is basically just the amount of compression that you're putting on there. So compression again is a tricky one, right? It's one that's a little bit harder to sort of hear unless you're really looking for it. It helps kind of fit different sounds into a mix pretty well. So again, you're going to want to use compression when you need to even or smooth out the sound of a given instrument, or it could be vocals, right? Compression is used a lot in vocal applications. And so again, what it really does is it takes the quietest parts of the signal and raises them up a little bit, and the loudest parts of the signal and lowers them a bit. That's overall what compression does. But it's highly subjective as far as what it sounds like to each person's ear. So, definitely play with the different settings. Hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of how compression works in these particular compressor pedals that are included with the Spark. So yeah, thanks. Hopefully you enjoy.